No, I was just trying to make a stupid joke, and then, like always, you ruined it for me. Oh, good one. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses the culture through various segments. My name, of course, is Patrick Kuhn, alongside my co-host, as always, that Tyler Hunt. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty well, dude. How are you?
It's been kind of a long day. I drove 7 hours to Cleveland this morning. I got up at like 5:30 this morning, and we drove to Cleveland, and traffic was a nightmare, and it's just been a really long day. Yeah, we're not recording like we normally do. I have a room dedicated. It's kind of my nerd room in my house, and it's kind of also our pseudo recording studio. And we're not in that room. I'm in Courtyard Marriott in Cleveland, Ohio, and so we're doing it old school. We used to record in separate rooms before, and it was a disaster. It took us about 5 episodes to realize that wasn't a good idea. And so this is the first time since we had snow, I think, a couple of months ago, that we haven't recorded in the same room. So it's a little weird. Hopefully the audio isn't too terrible, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, at least I'm not using the mic I typically use, so hopefully this turns out all right.
Yeah, for sure. I have a mic that I first bought, and this is kind of inside baseball, but so it's a little bit easier for me to travel with that mic than the ones that we have in our room. So I'm also recording with a different mic, and we'll see how it goes. I'm also tired, and I had a few drinks at dinner, so it might be a kind of a weird episode.
Yeah, because you're a complete lightweight dude, so.
Yeah, for sure. I had 2 beers at dinner today with my parents, and I'm feeling a little tipsy.
That's embarrassing.
It really, really is. I'm basically an old man at like 28.
Awesome.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't read the show notes, this is going to be a super abbreviated episode. I'm in Cleveland, like I said, for my cousin's wedding, and I'm in the hotel, and I have like an hour in between events with my family, so we're trying to squeeze this episode in kind of in between events with my family. So we're just going to do a review. We're going to be reviewing X-Men Apocalypse, so we're just going to go ahead and get straight into it off the top. So obviously, this is going to be a really short episode. We're not going to go through our normal segments, so if this is your first episode, I apologize for that. This normally would be our main topic, but unfortunately, like I said, we're kind of busy this week, so we just thought that we would talk about X-Men.
I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this without knowing what you're into.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. I know. You're going to have to wait a whole week to find out what I'm into.
Anticipation.
Today I was into calling people douchebags and cunts on the highway. I was so angry like the entire time we were driving. It was horrible.
Yeah, I mean, usually you're into doing that at like work or something, so I know that's
for sure.
Scenery.
Yeah, it was a little bit different calling people that I didn't know cunts and retards. Yeah, but I did get to get my Kevin Smith tickets today for Indie PopCon, so I'm super excited about that. So that was kind of a delight. I was afraid that they were going to sell out. We actually stopped at the particular time that they were going to go on sale and got lunch, so I could, while we're eating lunch, I could get on my phone and order them. So
yeah, I got mine too, man. This is like the most excited I've been for something in a long time. So I can't. Yeah, wait.
For sure. I mean, we were already psyched for Indie PopCon, as we always are, but this is just like the cherry on top, because honestly, like they always, as the year goes on, it gets closer to PopCon, they always announce people, and I'm just like, he's kind of the guy that I would think would be likely to come to one of these events that I would really want to see. Maybe like him, Scott Snyder, like there's a very short list of guys that would kind of be my like dream guys, and we got one of those the first year with Kevin Eastman, but when they announced it, I was like, holy shit, like I thought I was dreaming, because it was so cool.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's a joke in there somewhere with you meeting your dream guys, but I'm going to let it go.
For sure. All right, so like we said, we're going to just dive right into X-Men Apocalypse. Before we get into that, I do want to tell you how fucking weirded out I was by the Ninja Turtles guy while you were in the bathroom when we went to go see this movie. I finally got Tyler to go see a movie with me at the North Side, our show place North, where he used to work, and he was super awkward about it, but I finally got him to go see a movie with me at that theater, and I immediately regretted it when we were in the concession stand line, because you went to the bathroom, and this guy was standing next to me, and he was kind of eyeballing me the whole time, and I just kind of completely ignored it because I'm used to guys just eyeballing me all the time. I have to apologize to my wife all the time because I can't shut my sexy off, especially when it comes to dudes. And so I was used to guys eyeballing me all the time. But so he was kind of looking me up and down, and so I was pretending like I was on my phone because I didn't want to talk to this retard. So he looks at me and he kind of looks me up and down, and I forget. Like when I wear shorts that I have my Donatello tattoo on my leg. And so I was wearing a Ninja Turtle shirt and I had Donatello on my leg and I had my Ninja Turtles slip-on Van shoes on. So I probably look like a psychopath. But so he kind of looks me up and down and he kind of laughs and he goes, Ninja Turtles. It was like the first time he had ever thought, he had never heard of the Ninja Turtles, and he was just kind of laughing at how ridiculous the concept of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was. And then so we got up to the counter and he just looked at me, he was like, I could tell that he wanted to be best friends with me, and he was just like, so what movie are you seeing? And I was like, X-Men. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's awesome. I've already seen it. And I was thinking, how the fuck have you already seen it? Because this is literally the first showing. And he was like, stay for the after the credits, man. That scene is awesome. I'm like, well, who do I look like? Do I look like an idiot? Seriously, I'm going to stay. I mean, we've all been trained for the last 10 years to wait for the credits. I wait for the credits for movies that I'm not even sure have those scenes in there. Just because Marvel movies have tricked me in the past. So it was super weird interaction. I could tell this guy wanted to be my best friend, and he also looked like a fat Wolverine. He had the mutton chops and everything. He was a total turd.
That's awesome, man. Welcome to the North Side.
For sure. Like I said, we're talking about X-Men Apocalypse, which I think was my second or third round pick. I was super excited for this movie in our Rotten Tomatoes draft. I was really excited that I got it. I looked earlier today, and it is 47% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it is probably most likely going to be rotten by the time I take that screenshot. So it's not looking good for me. I really need Suicide Squad and TMNT to do a lot better than I thought they were going to be do. And I hate that I was rooting for at least TMNT anyways, but I hate that I'm having to count on those movies because I don't think that they're going to be very good. But yeah, this was kind of a disappointment for me.
Yeah, I wish that I could lie and say that I'm not enjoying this, but I very much love watching that rating go down and down.
For sure. I took a lot of joy watching Batman v Superman kind of plummet, because it started off okay, and then it's just completely plummeted. I enjoyed it because it was just reaffirming what I thought it was going to be anyways. And then obviously it being your first movie, and I started off with 380% in a row, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. And then you had two 90s in a row. Well, I guess Civil War ended up being 89%, but practically a 90. And I bashed Jungle Book so much I kind of looked like an idiot on that one. So yeah. I still laugh thinking about that stinger at the end of our episode, because I really forgot how hard I was on you about that movie.
Yeah, you were pretty difficult on me. So that was that will probably be the shining moment for me out of this whole Rotten Tomatoes draft.
For sure. The new X-Men movie is about X-Men new and old that have to band together to defeat the world's first and most powerful mutant apocalypse, as the title would suggest. We start off each review by just kind of giving our general overview of what we felt about the movie. We call it broad strokes. So, Tyler, how'd you feel about X-Men Apocalypse?
So, I mean, I went into this movie with the Rotten Tomatoes reviews at the forefront of my mind. It was at a 50% last night. So my whole thing going into it was I was expecting the worst. There's a lot of mixed reviews, and honestly, this movie has not really piqued my interest at all throughout all of its marketing. For whatever reason, the marketing for this movie just did not hit me like other X-Men movies have. Like, I was so excited for Days of Future Past, and I love that movie, but for whatever reason, I don't know what it was with it, I just was not really looking forward to Apocalypse. And in the end, like, I'm actually surprised, because I had a lot of fun with this movie. It's far from perfect, and I would have liked to have seen a better sequel to Days of Future Past because I like that movie so much. But this movie did have its moments of enjoyment. It's probably in the lower echelon of the 7 or 8 X-Men movies we've seen, but it's by no means a bad movie like some of the reviews are suggesting. So I ended up actually liking it more than I thought I would.
I think we're going to disagree a little bit on this movie. I wouldn't necessarily go as so far as to say it was a bad movie, but I think I had a lot more high hopes for this movie, obviously picking it so high in our draft, like I mentioned before. But the reason I did that was because Bryan Singer, I think this is his 5th X-Men movie, because he did the first 2, and then he did the first 2 of the, well, he didn't do First Class. That was Matthew Vaughn.
Yeah.
He did Days of Future Past, or Days of Future Past, and then he did this one. So this is his 5th X-Men movie. And so he hasn't made a bad X-Men movie, and I wouldn't necessarily, like I said, go as far as say this was bad. I just think it was very anticlimactic. It took really long to develop. It didn't necessarily pay off in the way that I wanted to. The first pictures of Apocalypse, I know the internet kind of went crazy because he kind of looks like Ivan Ooze. But then the trailer came out and everybody kind of changed course on this movie. They were kind of bashing it at first when those pictures came out. And then the first trailer came out and everybody was like, oh, they were super psyched about this movie, as I was as well, because I thought the trailer looked badass. But every part of the trailer during the movie felt really flat for me. The story took way too long to develop, and I don't know. It didn't seem like it was that important. Like a lot of the characters that they've been developing and a lot of these relationships that they've been developing in these past couple of movies, and they kind of wiped the slate clean with Days of the Future Past, but even some of the relationships that they built in the first 3 X-Men movies just seemed kind of marginalized in this movie. And so I was definitely kind of bummed out. I felt very similar coming out of this movie that I did with Age of Ultron. Like, this was kind of supposed to be the end of the First Class, McAvoy, Fassbender X-Men movies, and it just didn't feel like it was a conclusion to anything, and it certainly wasn't a satisfying conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go into it thinking of it as a conclusion by any means, but I will agree that on some of the points you made, you did make some very valid points.
All right, so let's just go ahead and jump right into the story. I kind of hinted at how I felt about the story. Like I said, it took way too long to develop. I was bored for about 3/4 of this movie. I had gotten about 2 hours of sleep in the last 30 hours, so I was kind of drifting in and out anyways. But the fact that this movie took really long to develop didn't help at all. The fact that the first part of the movie, it felt like Apocalypse was just jumping from one mutant to the next, kind of just collecting mutants, and it felt very similar to a First Class where Xavier and Magneto kind of went to mutant collecting X-Men. But in First Class, it felt fun. It was light. It was fun. You had the Wolverine cameo. That was cool. This one just felt really dry. And I mean, obviously it's a villain, so he's not going to crack jokes or anything like that. But it just felt boring. Like, I feel like I'm going to use that word a lot when I'm describing this movie, but I was bored through most of it, and it felt just okay. Let's get to the point. I don't care. It seemed like he was doing the same thing too to convince them, except for when he got to Magneto, they changed it up a little bit. But it was basically just I can give you better powers, or I can fix your powers and give you upgrade you. And it felt like he was just doing the whole stick more than once, and it was just kind of boring to watch it.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of that.
I kind of hated that Magneto felt wasted in this movie. He plays a big part in the plot of the movie, and he does have one of the few emotional moments that actually worked for me earlier in the movie, but then they kind of not necessarily drop it, but I don't know. It's definitely a driving force for his character in this movie, but at the same time, I don't know. He felt like he was kind of off on his own, because at the climax of the movie, and I'm trying to be vague to not to spoil anything, but the climax of the movie, they're fighting Apocalypse, and they kind of just forget about Magneto. And for me, Magneto's never been that second fiddle in the X-Men universe. I know Apocalypse is a huge villain for the X-Men as well, but it just feels like Magneto is the big bad for X-Men, and he just didn't feel like that in this movie.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought Magneto's arc up, because it really didn't work for me in this movie. You kind of tease something that happens at the beginning as having worked for you, and absolutely nothing done with this character in this film worked for me, to be honest. I think I agree with you quite a bit. I don't like him playing second fiddle to Apocalypse, and the fact that he was just one of the four horsemen kind of grouped together with weak characters like Psylocke and Angel in this movie was kind of silly to me. He's a bigger character than that, and I wish they would have done something more with him.
So you didn't like his arc early in the movie, right?
No, I thought that was kind of unnecessary. It was just, they had to give him something. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's like they had to give him something to lose. And I thought that it was a little cheap. Honestly,
like I said, it was one of the few emotional moments that worked for me. I actually have in my notes that I would love to see a Magneto movie solo with Fassbender in between Days of Future Past and this movie. Because I think it's an interesting, because the character in Days of Future Past doesn't really line up with the character that you see in the beginning of this movie. Like, I would like to see him get to that point. I think there's some interesting things that have to happen to that character to get him to that point. And I think it would be an interesting, kind of like a fugitive type of movie, because they mentioned that they've been kind of on the run for a while, and I think that would be an interesting movie, because I appreciate that early arc in the beginning of the movie with him. It was one of the few emotional moments that worked for me, and that may just be because Fassbender is amazing.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That sounds like a boring movie.
Okay. I disagree, obviously, but I really liked Quicksilver in this movie. We talked about with our Days of Future Past review that at least I enjoyed the fact that he was in that movie and he worked really well in that movie, but he was used sparingly. Like, he played his part and then he kind of went his own way, and I appreciate that they didn't overuse him. And I liked that because it made his character work well in this movie. Because I felt like if we saw a lot of him in Days of Future Past, his scenes in this movie probably wouldn't have worked as well, because it would have just been more of the same type of stuff that we saw in Days of Future Past. So I appreciated that. I think the movies worked well together, at least in that aspect. And I loved his character in this movie. I liked his development from Days of Future Past. And I never get tired of seeing him run around, and those like slow motion scenes just get me every time.
Yeah, that stuff with him, the slow motion aspect to him moving very fast, is done very well. Like, I really like how they do that in these films. I was just going to mention a couple things about the story real quick. We hadn't really talked about any of the newer mutants they brought in, and of course the one that I want to highlight really quick is Cyclops, just because Cyclops is my favorite X-Men, and I was really excited to not only see him be a part of this movie, but have a pretty decent sized part in it. Like, this is the best story arc that Cyclops has had since the very first X-Men movie. He dies.
For sure.
He dies in The Last Stand. In X2, he spends half the movie kind of captured by Stryker. So this is right up there with the first X-Men of having a really big Cyclops prominence, which was really nice. You go from that character and that group of X-Men having an okay kind of character development to the Four Horsemen. The Four Horsemen in this movie, their character development's pathetic. Like, I don't know anything about
For sure.
Psylocke. I didn't know from the comics. They don't tell the audience anything about her. Angel's pathetic in this movie, and he's wasted. Magneto's there, and you already know Magneto, so he doesn't really count. And then Storm probably has the best character arc out of any of them, but even her decisions at the end of the movie, which obviously you see coming, knowing who Storm is, don't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I felt like they teased the whole Mystique hero thing. That particular aspect of the character just didn't work for me. It felt like they planted it just so they would have a reason for Storm to come back to the other side.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, I've talked about it when I've talked about these movies before, just from a story aspect. Like, I hate the role that Mystique has played in this trilogy of X-Men movies, just because Jennifer Lawrence found fame and they had that go-to with her. So they kind of forced this character to be a hero and be more prominent in these movies than she is in the comics, and I really do hate that. I understand why they did it and why they have to kind of do it when you have a big star like that, but I really do kind of hate how she plays into the story.
For sure. You mentioned the new X-Men, or the new character. Well, I guess they're not really new, somewhat new, and the new actors playing them. I hate the fact that there has been two interpretations of Jean Grey as a Phoenix.
Oh yeah,
in The Last Stand, and in this one, that character has been completely wasted.
I hate that as well. I actually had that in my notes. They tease it way too soon. Like, this is the first time we've seen this iteration of Jean Grey, and you're already teasing the Dark Phoenix stuff. Like, you gotta let her breathe as a character before we care enough to care about Dark Phoenix.
Yeah, I mean, she's got to be raped as well. Oh, I'm sorry, I got that confused with something else.
What the fuck are you talking about?
I was trying to make a joke because it's the same girl that plays what's her name in Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah. That I wasn't really connecting that. I went straight to what's the other actress that plays Jean Grey? I don't know how to pronounce her name. It's like Famke Janssen or something.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. I went to her. I was like, I don't remember her ever getting raped in anything.
No, I was just trying to make a stupid joke, and then, like always, you ruined it for me. Oh, good one.
I know we're going to try to move on from story, but one thing I wanted to talk about in the story really quick was something that was teased in the last trailer for the movie. If you've seen that trailer, you know that Wolverine does make an appearance in this movie. I would say
that was awful.
That whole sequence was 100% unnecessary and added like a half hour to this movie that wasn't needed.
It was cool. I liked it, but like Doomsday and Batman v Superman, if I hadn't known that was going to happen, it would have blown me away.
Yeah.
It would have been really cool, but I knew it was going to happen, and I was just kind of sitting there waiting for it to happen. And once we see Stryker, I was like, okay, here we go. We're going to see Wolverine soon. And then, of course, we see Wolverine, and it's awesome. I enjoyed the scene, but like you said, it doesn't need to be in here.
It just doesn't make sense to the story that they were trying to tell with Apocalypse. It's like a side quest and didn't make much sense for this movie.
For sure. Two things real quick I'll mention, and then we'll move on from the story. I didn't like the fact that the fact that this film took place in the 80s didn't really matter. I really liked the fact that First Class and Days of Future Past, well, at least most of Days of Future Past, happen. They're period pieces, and I really like that. And I feel like the time period that they take place in matter to the story. I didn't like that the fact that this took place in the 80s didn't really matter in this movie.
Oh, for sure.
It could have happened at any point.
The only
so that was kind of a bummer.
The only thing was like they go to see Return of the Jedi, and that's about it.
Yeah, for sure. And then the fact that somebody read Superior Spider-Man and thought it was like the best comic ever. I know you didn't read it, Tyler, but the ultimate climax of this movie, like the third act, was ripped straight from an issue of Superior Spider-Man.
Oh, really?
It was like I almost laughed. So I don't want to spoil too much, but there's an issue of Superior Spider-Man. I believe it's issue 9, where Peter Parker and Doc Ock fight in Peter Parker's brain.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's pretty much, obviously, not Peter Parker and Doc Ock, but there is a strange battle that takes place in this movie, and it's basically the exact same thing that happens in that issue of a comic. And I thought that was one of the weirdest comics I've ever read in my life, and I just thought it was really weird that it was basically the climax of this movie was a ripoff of that issue of the comic book. So I just thought that was really strange.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, for sure. It was just somebody really loved Superior Spider-Man. All right, so we'll just go ahead and move on from the story to performances. It should come as no surprise that I loved Michael Fassbender in this movie, even though he's sparingly used. He kind of steals the show, even though Tyler doesn't agree with me so much with the beginning of his character in this movie. I thought that particular scene really worked, even though I would have liked to see that character developed a little bit more, see how he got to that point. In between Days of Future Past and X-Men Apocalypse. But it really worked for me, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's just fucking amazing. I would probably have his babies because he's just awesome. But, yeah, I mean, he steals the show for me. I thought James McAvoy did a really good job. I didn't like the fact that they weren't really in this movie too much. They didn't really share the screen too much, and that was kind of disappointing for me.
Yeah. Honestly, though, like with Michael Fassbender, Nicholas Hoult, and Jennifer Lawrence, they kind of turned in more of the same that I've seen from them in Days of Future Past and First Class. Like, they didn't do anything new, in my opinion. Maybe Michael Fassbender just a little bit with the early on stuff. James McAvoy, on the other hand, I thought that he kind of turned a new page as Professor Xavier. Like, I was really impressed with kind of how he elevated the character playing him for the third time.
For sure. I thought he was great. I was actually pretty impressed with, and this might have something to do with my Dawn of the Planet of the Apes bias, but I thought, what's his name? Cody Smith-McPhee was pretty good as Nightcrawler. I liked his, his character.
I thought he was great.
His character's kind of used for comic relief a lot in this movie, and it actually worked a lot. I really enjoyed his character in this movie, and I thought he did a good job. Yeah, he was a little bit creepier than what's his name? Alan Cummings.
Yeah, Alan Cumming did great as Nightcrawler in X2, so this kid had some pretty big shoes to fill in a way, and I thought that he really did do justice to the character.
For sure. How'd you feel about Cyclops? I'm blanking on the kid's
Sheridan?
name.
Ty Sheridan?
Yeah, how'd you feel he did?
I mean, I thought he did great. I saw him in Mud, and I guess I saw him in The Tree of Life, but I don't really remember his performances too well. He didn't blow me away or anything. I don't know that he was given a ton to work with, but I mean, he was adequate as Cyclops. Like, I don't have any complaints there. As far as Sophie Turner goes, I mean, she didn't really blow me away as Jean Grey because all I see is Sansa whenever I see her act. And I don't know if that's her or if that's just because she's already played such an iconic character on a show I love. But I mean, I didn't really see Jean Grey. I saw Sansa Stark. Yeah,
it's kind of tough because when you've seen, close to 60 episodes of a TV show and you see that character over and over again, it's kind of hard to compartmentalize that they're an actor and they're going to play multiple roles. So,
yeah, for sure.
I see that. It seemed weird. I don't know. I thought she was going to play a bigger role from the trailer, and I thought she was going to be a little bit more dynamic. And like I said, a lot of her scenes kind of fell flat for me. I don't know. I wasn't too impressed, other than Nightcrawler. I wasn't too impressed with the new cast.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see Cyclops play more of a kind of a tortured role, because he is one of the only characters, or one of the only X-Men that can't really control his powers, even though once he has the visor on, he can somewhat control it, but if he didn't have it on, then he couldn't control it at all. So I think there's could have been more to do with that character, but that's not necessarily a knock on him playing the character. It's just kind of the material that he had to work with.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll see them in future movies and he'll be able to kind of move into that leadership role that Cyclops is known for.
For sure. How'd you feel about Oscar Isaac as Apocalypse?
I'm a little mixed on it. I didn't think that he delivered a bad performance. I mean, he's a little over the top, but nothing that really bothered me. I think that it kind of goes with the character. There were times where his makeup looked a little cheesy and I couldn't really take him seriously, to be honest.
For sure.
I don't think that he necessarily delivered a poor performance.
It's a one-note character in this movie, and I don't think it has anything to do with Oscar Isaac. I think we've seen him in enough stuff to know that he's not a bad actor. I just think that he just didn't have much to work with, and it's hard for me. He looked really bad in this movie. The creature design or the character design was just not good. I don't know what they were thinking. Yeah. It doesn't look like the Apocalypse that I know, and it looked really cheesy.
99 out of 100 times I wouldn't say this, but they should have gone CGI instead of practical effects with him.
Yeah. Well, I know that a lot of his voice was done post-production, and so maybe that's, I don't know. It was very distracting.
Oh, I would agree.
So how'd you feel about the action? We're going to move on from the performances unless there's somebody else that you want to mention.
Oh, yeah, real quick, just because I have to. I forgot this was in my notes. The worst performance in the movie, Olivia Munn, but I may be biased.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if she actually did her own stunts, because there was nothing for her to do. She did crazy flip, and that was about it.
She's a trooper, man.
Yeah,
she's a hero to girls everywhere.
She did one flip that she was probably in a harness, and that was it. Like she was barely in this movie.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'm biased, but yeah, she was the worst.
For sure.
All right, I'm ready to move on to action.
All right, so I mean, there honestly there wasn't a ton in this movie.
No, not at all.
And I think obviously that has a lot to do with my feelings for this movie. It's supposed to be I felt like going into this movie, and maybe I just had the wrong expectations for it, but I thought it was going to be some epic conclusion to this First Class trilogy that they had started, and it wasn't, because there was not a ton of action in this movie. I thought Apocalypse's powers were kind of cheesy, like just turning people into, like, capturing them in sand. I thought that was kind of lame.
That was lame.
I felt like if they fought him anywhere but Egypt, he probably would have been out of luck. Like, he just kept turning people into sand. I just thought that was super lame. I don't know, though. I think the Wolverine fight, even though it didn't really move a whole lot as far as plot's concerned, but I thought it was needed just for the sense that it needed something to kind of... Because it had been a while since anything real happened as far as action was concerned. So I felt like it was needed in that sense. I really liked the Quicksilver stuff. Obviously, we talked about that a little bit ago. But I felt like that was really lacking in this movie. And then by the time they got to the climax, even though there wasn't a ton of action in the climax either, it was a little too little too late for me.
Yeah, I think that for me, the action in almost every X-Men movie feels very similar. And I'd like to see them maybe try something new or do something different in future X-Men movies, because it all feels so... I don't want to say connected, because obviously all these movies are connected, but I feel like everything is kind of recycled. Like, no action scenes in this movie stood out to me. Like, you had all sorts of new mutants with new powers, and nothing stood out to me. I just think that they kind of dropped the ball with the action in this movie.
For sure, and just the beginning part, it just takes so long to get anywhere that once they do get to the little action that's in this movie, it just... Like I said, it was too little, too late.
Yep, I would agree.
All right, unless there's anything else that you want to bring up, that was all that I had in my notes.
One very minor thing, the last shot of the movie with the characters made me ejaculate hands-free.
Oh, yeah, that was cool. That was really fucking cool.
Yeah.
It reminded me of the cartoon, because there's a lot of scenes with, like, Wolverine and Gambit training in that little room, and yes. I thought that was really fucking cool.
Like, I don't want to spoil anything, but, like, there's a lot of fan service in that last minute.
For sure. All right, so we'll just go ahead and give it a star rating. So what'd you feel about X-Men Apocalypse?
I kind of said it in my broad strokes. Like, I didn't hate this movie. Obviously, as we went through our categories here, like, there is a lot to dislike. That being said, I think I'm going to give it a 3, just because that's the lowest rating I can give it to still recommend it. I'd recommend, if you're an X-Men fan, obviously seeing this movie, but it's nowhere near the upper echelon of some of the X-Men movies that's come before it.
Obviously, I'm going to take out the 2 Wolverine movies. I did like Wolverine. Obviously, I didn't like Wolverine, the Origins movie. But I would only put this movie above The Last Stand. Like, it's not a bad movie. I kind of went back and forth between 2.5 and 3, and I think just the way that you rationalized it kind of makes sense. So I think I'm going to go with 3, but it's a really soft 3. Like
I agree.
I want to recommend it. And if you're listening to this podcast, well, obviously you're listening, you're probably going to go see this movie anyways because it's a big nerd movie, especially this summer. It's kind of weak with really good comic book movies. So you're definitely going to go see this movie, and I would recommend it, but it's a really, really soft recommendation.
All right, man. Perfect.
All right. Well, we normally cap off each episode by talking about a nerd favorite, but like I said, we're kind of crunched for time. I got to go to another family get-together here in a little bit. So that's going to be it for a really short episode of the Nerd You're Looking For podcast. You can come check us out at Indie PopCon here in June. It runs from June 17th to the 19th. We are booth 351. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. It's both at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. Vote for us for Podcasts of the Month at podcastland.com. You can comment, subscribe on our YouTube channel, The Nerds You're Looking For. Check out our new Twitch channel. Rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio. Basically, any good podcatcher you use, we're on it. You can also email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt.
we are The Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
See you guys later.